who's wrong and who's wronger. In this corner, followed by millions, James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell. And in that corner, ignored by millions, Steve Dash Rinko Liebers.
Hey everybody, welcome back. You're here. James and I, almost not so much. But welcome to Wrong and Wronger, the podcast where your hosts show up about 14 milliseconds before we begin to broadcast, to record. James, our lives have been sent into hyperspace. Would you agree?
I don't know what you mean by that, but I'd say the 14 seconds or 14 milliseconds is a bit generous. I would say maybe 1 or 2 milliseconds max we got on here before this thing started. You have to understand how little prep work goes into it. I mean, it shows, but sometimes people try to make things seem off the cuff and chaotic. But this is all natural chaos. I assure you, we are really
this is organic chaos.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, speaking of chaos, James, we unleashed some kind of tempest in a teapot last week, but we'll get to that in a second. I do want to introduce the show. This is the podcast where Breakwell and I debate topics that seem like they're nothing on the surface, but James, they will trend on Twitter.
Yeah, they pop up and they stick around for a while, then they disappear forever. Such is the nature of the internet. But we are always proud to cash in on a trend as it happens. So let's go ahead and jump on this bandwagon before it derails.
Yeah, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about what's the best part of cake, the frosting or the cake part. And this was inspired by somebody who posted a picture of themselves, and it was like triple layered cake with layers of frosting in between, and they had eaten the cake out from between the frosting. And some people thought that was the most brilliant thing they'd ever seen, and some people were horrified. So we're going to jump into the debate.
So what is the best part of cake, the frosting or the cake?
Yes.
And as the viewers have surmised, I was searching frantically for the Guam Quarter of Fate while you were talking there, and lo and behold, I found it. My life, James, my life is like a snow globe that got shaken, dropped, broken, and then stepped on by a 76 trombone parade.
I don't know what's going on over there. I don't want to know. There will be no personal questions asked after this broadcast. We're just going to keep rolling.
Well, it got personal this week, James, because we eliminated the penalty videos last week, and I'm fairly certain all 8 of our listeners chimed in on Twitter, and there was universal agreement that you and I are the epitome of evil.
There are, but you know what? Those 8 regulars, I recognized all the names. They are our regulars going back, but like in terms of viewership, like it made no difference this week from any other week. Like in order to be mad about that, you had to watch the video and then be mad. Like you had to give us your view first. So I know for a fact it makes no viewership difference whatsoever. Like if it was giving us a boost, we would have kept going, but it wasn't. And then YouTube cruelly struck down my Napoleon Dynamite video, and that was my last straw. I think I got it back up, but I had to mute it for part of it, because they said that the music was copyrighted, fair use didn't apply, and it's like I'm just done. This is too much trouble for no result. So although we've angered all 8 of our listeners, the decision stands. I mean, I can't say we'll never throw out like a one-off challenge video for something that arises from this just us hating each other, but as a regular feature, it's done.
Wow. So you were able to petition YouTube. I'm sure you got all 8 people to sign, and they reinstated the Napoleon Dynamite video.
I believe so, but I didn't watch through it all the way. It would depress me too much. But I'm pretty sure there's like a 45-second chunk in the middle that's muted. The song goes the whole time, but it's playing off my tiny laptop speakers, and so for part of it, the algorithm couldn't detect the song, but part of it could, and I'm pretty sure it's muted. So maybe that's for the best. You don't need to hear me plodding around anyway. Muting is probably better.
So good. All of the penalty videos are up in their full glory for everyone to behold and marvel toward.
It's true, for posterity. So just in case you ever want to get a job someplace else, this will immediately disqualify you. We are unemployable.
Oh man. Ain't that the truth? Actually, that ain't the truth. And that will lead us in a perfect segue. We are segue machines today to our compliment portion of the broadcast.
All right.
And James, I saw that you had tweeted a picture of you in a sound booth looking like a real voice artist.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, Breakwell is coming into his own. What was that experience like for you doing the audio of your book?
Yeah, so it was for Bare Minimum Parenting, the ultimate guide to not quite ruining your child. This is the second book I've recorded. They hired me both times to read my own book, which I was pretty excited about. But the best part was they didn't make me slow down. I talk on there exactly like I'm talking right now. And so they booked like 14 hours to do this thing, and I banged it out in 6.5. I was just through that thing. Because they're like, you know what? You're not on NPR. This is the speed you rant at. It's like, that's right. I've never felt more validated in my life. And yeah, and I just went. It was, and mind you, that 6.5 hours was with, I kid you not, 909 do-overs. Like, anytime I flubbed a line and they had to hit a button to go back, they tallied up the flubs at the end, 909. Now, sometimes I flubbed the same line like 4 times in a row, but yeah, 909, that poor audio engineer gave his life to make that book. So, and then I cost him money because he's a freelancer, so I cost him a day of work by going so fast. So I hurt a lot of people that day, but you know what? The book is done, and I'm excited about that. So it'll be ready for launch date, along with the paper version and the ebook version.
Do we have a date circled on the calendar or not yet?
November 6th is when it comes out. If you order it online, sometimes you get it a couple weeks earlier, but November 6th is the official launch date.
Fantastic. And that's in all formats?
All formats across the board here in the UK. Actually, the UK it launches like 3 or 4 days earlier because they're, quirky like that. But I don't think that's going to help most of our listeners. I think they're stuck with the US version.
Fantastic. Well, that's great and a lot of fun for you, and it generates revenue and gets you out there, and it'll extend your brand. I'm proud of you.
Yes, that book supports this podcast right here, because this podcast is not making any money. So to make this possible, we got to make money some other way. And my compliment to you, Steve, is that you continued your nomadic lifestyle. Like, even in your recreational activities, you are constantly on the road. You travel for work. You travel for your kids' hockey. You are never home. I don't know why you're in the process of buying another home. You don't need a home. You live in hotel rooms. So props to you for being permanently homeless.
Oh, man. Well, I'm actually in Journey 4 studio right now, but... This is why I had to blow in. I'm leaving at 5 tomorrow morning for San Antonio. I just came in from St. Louis. Yeah, I do 3 podcasts. The Commute, of course, launched this week. I do play-by-play for a hockey team. So I'm in St. Louis today. Next weekend, I'm in Denver. And I do my full-time private practice. I do my speaking engagements on the road. So one day I'll die, and I'll be happy. But until that day...
You just had to rub it in. You do 3 podcasts to my 2. I see how it is. We were tied with 2. You had to slip the Commute back in there. That's okay. I will give you the podcaster crown for now. For now.
You have 2 audiobooks to my none. Actually, the only books that Twitter generated for me, you're in. So you and I are tied on those too. The geez, I can't even think of it. It's a long title, but it's the best
books.
parenting tweets on Twitter.
Yeah, those did come out. Yeah, that's true. So we got some history there, and you should definitely check.
We actually got paid for those.
You should definitely check out the Commute. I myself have not listened to this episode, so I can't vouch for it. But I'm sure, knowing Steve, that it is wonderful and terrible at the same time. So you just got to hear it. Who's your first guest?
My first guest is a gal who was an FBI special agent for 20 years, and she just retired, and she was on site right after 9/11. She was the lead researcher in a major branch of the investigation. Wow. Gal named Martha Heston. Really interesting interview.
You didn't interview her one day before retirement, did you? That's always a perilous time in law enforcement.
She was like Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon. Yeah, she's just getting too old for this stuff. But we're getting old, and so is this podcast, James. We got to flip the quarter and do the debate.
All right,
as another segue rolls right on by. So cake, frosting or cake, which is the best part? Which side, or what will be represented by the sides for you?
Heads, I'm cake. Tails, I'm frosting.
Ooh, you went opposite of what I thought you were going to say. Heads is cake.
Yes.
We all love cake and frosting, and you're back to your old ways. It is, well, there, it's gone now, but it was heads. Everybody saw George Washington. You, sir, have cake.
What did you drop over there? Do I even want to know?
I dropped the quarter. The phone is up against the thing, and the quarter went down in between, and I'm never going to be able to get it. I'm going to have to slither on my belly like the serpent in the Garden of Eden to get the darn thing.
You better, because just to be
James,
clear,
I am on my last nerve.
If the quarter goes, so goes the podcast. Like, we cannot continue without that specific quarter. It all depends on that. But as long as we still have the podcast for now, I'll go ahead and prove you wrong real quick. Because cake is where it's at. When you order cake, it has both cake and frosting. But you call it cake. You don't call it frosting. Frosting is just an auxiliary part. It's a minor feature. The bulk of the action is the cake. And everything else is just decoration. I mean, the cake is the bulk of the calories. It's the bulk of the flavor. I mean, the best moment with a cake is when you slice it apart past all that gaudy frosting to see what the real flavor is inside. Because that frosting just hits your lips for a second, but that cake, that's the substance. That is the essence of it. That's like saying what's more important, your car or the paint on the car. I mean, the car is important. The paint is just the outside dressing, and that's what you're dealing with here. The frosting is just the sugar paint that covers a cake. There is no contest. Cake is better than frosting.
You know, just because you label something analogous doesn't mean that it's analogous.
It does.
I don't understand the whole car paint thing, but James, did you get married, James?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a cake at your wedding,
I had a wedding cake, not a wedding frosting pile, for your information.
Okay, I like how you're trying to subvert my argument right from the word go. If you stripped the frosting off of that thing, your wife would have been angry. She'd have stormed out of the banquet hall, probably kicking the door open with that dress kind of bunched up because the trailer was going to be dragging behind her into the parking lot, and she wouldn't have cared because the frosting makes the cake. You can take a pedestrian sheet cake and make it pop, man. That thing can rock and roll because frosting can do anything with the cake, and it's tasty. Frosting brings out the little kid in you, man. What would a Twinkie be without the cream filling? It would just be a piece of spongy mess. The frosting, you can make it thick, you can make it thin, you got butter frosting, all the different kinds of cake, you got just as many kinds of frosting, and you can decorate that sucker with frosting. If you've ever watched Cake Wars or Cake Artists or whatever those reality shows are, they can make the most amazing works of art with frosting. And Fondant, which I don't even know what that is, but it probably tastes good.
You just checkmated yourself. You stumbled into a very unfortunate argument. I'm going to show you how unimportant frosting is. Let's talk about fondant. Fondant is basically edible plastic.
You pronounced it correctly.
Yes,
Thank you.
I've seen those Cake Boss videos too. And I told my wife, man, that looks delicious. And she's like, you know, fondant is tasteless and barely edible, right? It's made so it's like putting Play-Doh on a cake. It's technically edible, but when you go to eat it, they strip off all that fondant, and all that's left is the cake. It's like building with Legos and having like a brownie hidden inside. The two are completely unrelated, and it's so unimportant to the cake that it's okay to strip it away. It's just pointless decoration on top. It's all flash and no substance. Nobody in their right mind eats fondant. Again, it's pointless window dressing, and when they peel it off, nobody cares. They don't say, well, that's not a cake because it doesn't have frosting, it just had fondant. They say that's a cake because whether it's frosting or it's fondant, it doesn't matter. The main event is cake. And fondant just proves beyond a doubt how pointless frosting is. If you can peel something off and happily eat what's left, how excited are you about what you peeled off? Fondant is just the wrapper. It's like saying, what's more important, the Tootsie Roll or the wrapper it came in? Of course the Tootsie Roll is more important. The cake is more important. And back to my wife at the wedding, you think my wife would have been happy if we had put frosting over some styrofoam? No! The frosting wasn't the point. The decoration wasn't the point. The cake underneath was the point. The cake is everything, and you're just done. You don't have anything else to come back at me with.
I'm fairly convinced that the part of the cake you put in the freezer for a year and then eat on your anniversary is a piece of styrofoam. So don't tell me that that's actually edible. And let's take fondant or fondant.
Fondant.
What is the correct way to say it? Fondant.
Fondant.
Right.
Fondant.
Oh, wow. Boy, this is where I should have probably studied in school. Anyway, if you take fondant out, what percentage of people have actually had a cake with fondant on it? I'm guessing it's less than 0.3%. I know I haven't, so don't take a little sliver of the argument and make it the whole thing. That's a logical fallacy, and I can't remember what it's called because I didn't study, and I had logic class at 8 in the morning. But frosting, nobody in your household will argue over who gets the most cake. It's who gets which piece of the cake that has the particular glob of frosting. Whether it's a flower, whether it's a little figure on the frosting, whether it's a swimming pool made out of frosting. That's what the kids want because frosting is fantastic. And if you've ever taken a big like a serving spoon full of frosting out of the Duncan Hines jar and just shoved it right into your mouth, James, you know that there can be heaven on earth, my friend. Frosting is the bomb. And you can put whatever you want on the cake written in frosting. Someone dared me to get a cake with a cuss word on it, so my wife went to the store and had the lady write a cuss word on the cake, and I tweeted a picture of it. That's why I married her. She's way cleverer than I am. But frosting makes its own argument because it's just delicious.
Well, actually, my wife isn't a big fan of frosting, and when she eats her cake, she typically strips off the excess frosting and gives it to me because I'm a garbage disposal, and I'll eat both cake and frosting. But the cake is where it's at, and if she gave me just frosting and with no cake, I'd probably get sick. My kids only, I think 2 of them like frosting and 2 of them think it's too much. I mean, it's not universal. And as for the fondant thing, it might only be 3% of people have ever eaten a cake with fondant on it, but 100% of the glitzy cakes on TV that made cake a thing, the whole cake phenomenon on Food Network and the Learning Channel and everything else, 100% of popular cakes in the public eye are covered in fondant. It's all marketing. It's all out there. Cake is being driven. It's being driven by this illusion, this lie. And the only reason it works is when you peel it off, there's still cake underneath, so people aren't terribly disappointed. It's like, yes, you covered this in deception, but cake itself is so amazing we can still get by. I think you will find there are people who think that frosting is too sweet and they can't handle it. But there's nobody who says cake is too sweet. If you had the Venn diagram here, you've got, I mean, the overlap is just a very small sliver. Everybody eats cake, and then there's a small sliver that likes frosting, but nobody eats just frosting and no cake. That's not a thing. It's not possible.
I could put frosting on a slice of Wonder Bread and it would be fabulous. I don't know who you're talking about. We will let the voters decide. Cast the dice and let them know how to vote for Olivas.
All right, let me dig it out here.
That was another segue, by the way. I'm on fire tonight.
Yeah, liar, liar, pants on fire. All right. That's a segue, too.
So bitter.
All right. If you want to vote for me and cake, and who would vote against cake? Vote for 17. If you want to vote for Steve and general insanity, vote for 8, just the number 8. And if you want to throw away your vote,
that was my lucky number as a kid.
With a random, vote for 9. We are clustered together today. 8, 9, and 17. 17's the number.
That's going to make a problem. You know, the one thing that and 8 plus 9 equals 17, so we're mathematically congruent. But we are at the nexus of the universe, man. All right, 17 for Breakwell and dry, bland, banal food. 8 for Olivas, like fireworks in your mouth, and not Olivas, but the frosting. And 9 for the throwaway vote.
Why, Steve? Why?
We almost made it to the finish line. All right, until next week, Breakwell's probably going to regain his composure sometime around 5-6 days from now, so he'll be ready to go. Don't worry about it. But until next week, this is Steve Olivas for James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell saying thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and remember, 2 wrongs, according to Breakwell, can make a right.